Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest Deb Brandon, and she's here today to share with us her two books, Threads Around the World and But My Brain Had Other Ideas. Now, Deb is a weaver, respected textile artist, and fiber enthusiast and writer. She's been an active volunteer with Weave a Real Place, including serving multiple terms as a board member, as well as writing the long-time-running Textile Techniques from Around the World column. Deb is a popular speaker on textiles and other topics. She's an avid traveler and has competed nationally and internationally in dragon boating, and has been a professor in the Mathematical Science Department at Carnegie Mellon University. So let's welcome to the show, Deb Brandon.
Oh, thank you very much.
What a pleasure it is to have you here. And my goodness, your book is pretty in-depth. It's got such great, it's got great pictures. It's got a lot of information. And so I have to ask, what inspired you to write this book?
Since I was a child, I've been interested in ethnic textiles. And after I joined an organization called WARP, W-A-R-P, which is an acronym for Weave a Real Peace, I got even more interested. This is a group of people whose mission is to improve the quality of life of textile artisans in need around the world. And a year after I joined, I started writing articles for the quarterly newsletter. The column was entitled Textile Techniques from Around the World. And I think it was about 3 years into writing these articles, the WARP board suggested that I compile them and turn them into a booklet that would be sold to the WARP members as a fundraiser. But as I started editing the articles, it was clear that it was more than that. And my interest in the meantime had shifted from the techniques themselves to the stories behind them, about the people, the communities, the traditions behind the textiles, and the end result was the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so how long did it take you to develop all that information for the book? Was it several years? How long did that take?
Well, there was the initial information from the original articles, so those usually take me no more than a week. But when I wanted to expand and rework them, I don't know. It took about, probably 3-4 years to get everything together. Part of the issue was that shortly after that decision by the WARP board was made, I suffered a severe brain injury. So there was a good chunk of time during which I didn't write at all. But what happened, one of the effects of the brain injury was pretty severe fatigue, and that really limits how much I can write, how much I can do on a daily basis. So it took me a good while, several years, I'd have to say.
Well, and when you look back in your life, when was the point when you first became interested in textiles?
Well, I grew up with ethnic textiles around me. Well, actually, my love of textiles, of handmade textiles, started when I was about 7 years old, when my mother taught me how to knit. And from then on, in school, I learned to embroider and sew, a little bit of weaving, things like that. And then as an adult, I learned some additional techniques, like, really went into weaving, felting, and such. But also, as a child, as I said, I was surrounded by ethnic textiles. We moved to Israel when I was 6, and we used to visit the nearby Druze village and buy various ethnic crafts, including textiles. And we also visited Jerusalem periodically. We always stopped by the old city in the Arab Quarter, where the ethnic textiles were just all over the place. So and also my father traveled a lot, and he'd bring back gifts like saris from India, an embroidered apron from Hungary. So it was just part of my childhood.
Yeah, it's all part of, I'm sure having that all around really develops that interest. And I love how you bring that together in threads around the world, because people who don't have the same, let's say they haven't traveled as much, they really get a sense for what different communities, how textiles just interwoven and all of that.
Yeah, very much so. And that's a big part of the message, that not only do these textile traditions connect past to present, but they also connect us through the stories and, textiles themselves. I mean, the textiles have been an important aspect of humanity from the beginning.
Well, and since you touched on that, I'd love for you to share with our audience, why is textile art important for our global community?
Well, as I said, the obvious part is connecting us to our roots in many ways, but the other part is textiles are universal, and so this is something we have in common with humanity in general. But also the stories behind the textiles are, in many ways, they show us that we're connected with each other. There's no them. There's only us. There's no us and them. There's only us. And you talk to artisans around the world. You listen to their stories, and in my case, I write the stories, and we have a lot in common, no matter what.
Yeah, there really is a lot. Well, when we look at the relationship of textile and traditions, they have this grassroots economy kind of, connection. And so how does that, when we look at that from a global perspective, how does textiles help different communities?
Well, okay, part of the thing is that since the Cultural Revolution, it's been harder and harder for textile artisans to earn a living through their textiles. If you just go to China or India, there are very cheap knockoffs, which are, if you compare them to the handmade stuff, there is no comparison. But without educating the public, there's no chance of helping. There's no chance of for these artisans to earn a living. And when, in fact, if you have these, for instance, in India, there are people who this is what they know, and to help them improve their quality of life, you have to educate the public. And once you do that, and you teach them techniques to make them more marketable in the Western world, and make them more cost-effective, it becomes more profitable. And I mean, we see the results. I mean, entire communities, it's really changed what's going on. In particular, it's made education more accessible to them. I mean, there are plenty of countries where education is not free. For instance, in Guatemala, if you don't have money, your kids aren't going to go to school. So it's really made a difference.
Well, and so when we look at how textile, it sounds like there's a resurgence of textile and those traditions coming back into the community after having some of this training done, where people are being able to really understand how to make it more cost effective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's absolutely no question. Part of the issue of helping them become more marketable is also helping them create a niche in the Western market. And again, there comes education and various outlets like, there's in this area, there's 10,000 villages. Also, for instance, in I think it's the baskets from, I believe, Botswana became very common, well, not common, became available in department stores. Patterns people are more aware of the patterns. I think it is a lot of it is to do with educating the public, but also the, I don't know, ex-hippies, things like that, or eternal hippies, who've always been interested in that side of things and interested in helping textile art, well, any kind of artisans in need. So it, as you said, there's been a resurgence. Also, if you walk into places like Walmart, they have the cheap knockoffs, but even though it takes away from the ability of artisans to earn a decent living, on the other hand, it raises awareness. It becomes part of the fashion, that kind of thing. So it's almost happened organically.
What are some, I know in your book you have it listed pretty much by, different countries and what their textiles look. What's some of the differences that really stand out for you?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is there are a lot of commonalities that really surprise me. But differences are often in the technique themselves. The overall technique might be similar, but depending on what materials are accessible, there are going to be differences in the process. Also, a lot of the in the patterns, a lot of the motifs are stylized versions of, for instance, animals, and those are different from place to place. But the thing I found really striking was, well, first of all, the traditions, the folklore behind the patterns and the techniques are on the one hand similar, creation, things like that, but on the other hand, there are different versions of that. The one that I found really interesting was Berber rugs in Morocco, that not only are the finished products, do the finished products carry symbolism, but the actual process of weaving is symbolic of the life cycle of male children. Male sons. Well, most sons are male. For instance, when you start setting up the loom, that's analogous to the birth of the child. When you start prepping it for the weaving, that is a child going through childhood within the women's sphere. And when you start the actual weaving and you go through the weaving, that is symbolizes the life of the son through adulthood. And when you cut the textile off the loom, that is analogous to the death of the child or son. And that really surprised me, the idea that you, can't think of the word, that you associate having a finished textile with death really bothered me. So I looked into it further. The Berber are Muslims, so I wanted to know more about, do they believe in an afterlife, that kind of thing. And I was thrilled and surprised to learn that there is an afterlife, and when the textile goes into its new home, there's a rebirth and it has a new life there. The other thing that I found interesting was that at the death of the textile, when you finish a textile, they perform last rites as they would do this to a person who died. It was a fabulous discovery. In Bhutan, the idea that textiles are still very much a part of society, part of, when people go through some sort of important event in life, for instance, marriage, birth, a promotion, people, they have their celebration, and the attendees produce a gift for the hosts, and the gift is a gift of textiles. It's very much part of life, and it's still used for bartering, not quite as much as it was, but it's still very much of what's important in their lives. So there's a lot of little things like that I really enjoyed learning about this kind of stuff. And also the things like the place of women in the various communities. In some, they have it's very clear women versus men. In others, the women have equal status. I mean, back to Bhutan, the thing that I found that was interesting was that women are in charge of everything to do with the home, which doesn't sound so great, but also the thing that I thought was incredible, well, not incredible, surprising, was when it comes to the home, it goes from mother to daughter. The men are more men don't have, cannot own or do not own property. Women do.
Well, that's really fascinating. And, I know that you also mentioned that there's a lot of similarities that surprised you. What are some of those?
Well, in the patterns, in the motifs, there are, for instance, let's see, in Laos, in the pattern in the weaving is very much about Naga, which is the serpent, which is very it's an integral part of the beliefs. And when you go to Peru, amongst the Shipibo, they have very similar patterning. In Laos, it's in the weaving. In Shipibo, amongst the Shipibo, it's in cross stitch and fabric painting. But we're back to the whole serpent thing, which is very central to their beliefs. That was one example which I found quite surprising. And then in general, a lot of the smaller motifs, like, for instance, ram's horns, very prevalent amongst the Mongolian felters, and also in various other societies. I can't really think of one right now. Let's see, what else? I mean, a lot of the motif issues are, when it comes to fertility, symbols for fertility are very similar across a lot of cultures. It was quite fascinating.
Yeah, it must have been going through and looking at all the similarities that kind of just come together. Well, and so how does textile art, I know we shared a little bit about it, but how does it tell, like, the cultural stories and broadcast our humanity?
Well, I think, first of all, there's textiles in general have stories are very much part of traditional textiles or handmade textiles. And when it comes to the traditions, there are a lot of similarities in what the meaning behind things are. As I said, there's symbols like for fertility and good fortune, wealth, things like that. But also there are also the stories of the artisans themselves, the struggles they go through, their lifestyles, what impact their lives have on the textiles that they make. These stories are very much universal. They're people too, go through similar struggles, some of it, financial, familial, things like that. And you see this, and you could relate to it. On the one hand, for instance, traditional attire honors particular cultures and marks our differences. But on the other hand, if you look deeper into the stories, you're back to the universal. And very much when it comes to humanity, it's very much a combination of individuality and similarities. And textiles really exhibit that.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Deb Brandon in regards to her 2 books, Threads Around the World and But My Brain Had Other Ideas. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Deb Brandon, and she's sharing with us her 2 books, Threads Around the World and But My Brain Had Other Ideas. Now, before we went for break, we were talking about textiles, and one of the things that came to mind, I'm just curious, what are some of the textile traditions that are still being used today?
Oh, God, many of them. Everything that is in the book they're still being used. Some of them continue through time. Others have been revived. Let's see, backstrap weaving here's another one that's common to many places. Backstrap weaving, that's a kind of weaving where you have the stationary loom and, well, not necessarily stationary, the main part of the loom, and then the weaver is connected to the loom, and by leaning forward and back against the strap creates tension on the warp. Those things, those kind of looms, backstrap looms, no matter what the frame looks like, they're common all over the place. South America, Asia. It's when you look at Japan versus let's see. God, I can't think of them right. But as I said, they're across the globe. They use the same thing. So as I said, backstrap weaving in Guatemala and Peru have been ongoing since God knows when they first started. Spinning yarn, again, in many places is still ongoing, has been ongoing in Africa, South America, some places in Asia. Now, there are things that have particular techniques that have been revived, or in Europe you'll see things that came close to dying out but have been revived. So, but it's mostly the actual techniques, the particular, it's in the details, but the overall thing has been ongoing. I mean, for instance, in Peru, there's a particular technique that essentially died out. No one was practicing it. And then this one woman, Nilda Alvarez, she found a piece of, an antique piece of textile using this method, and she found a couple of grandmothers who remembered something in their childhood. Somebody was doing something similar. So she managed to figure it out with their help, and it's now been revived. So there's a lot of in Italy, in Perugia, there's a particular weaving technique that was again dying out, and there's a woman whose, I believe it was her great-grandmother, started reviving it, and she started a school to teach the younger generation how to weave these textiles, and this school went from mother to daughter. To this day, there's a woman who teaches young women how to weave these textiles. It's pretty incredible what people are doing. I mean, when you think back, it's not just today that people are trying to revive these traditions. It's actually there have been women who've been started in the early 1900s, late 1800s, that kind of thing. So there's a lot there's a lot that's going on. Some have been revived, others have been ongoing.
Mm. Well, your book, Threads Around the World, really shares so much. I mean, it's such a great read, beautiful pictures throughout it, so people really get a sense almost that they're right there with the people who are creating the textiles or doing the weaving. So it's very just a great resource. You also have another book that you've written, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that for us.
I mentioned that I suffered a brain injury. I have clusters of malformed blood vessels in my brain. They're called cavernous angiomas. I forget how many I have, 10 or so, and 2 of them bled, which wreaked havoc on my life. I had seizures and horrendous headaches. My balance was gone. I had cognitive issues. I couldn't be the mother I used to be. I couldn't drive. I couldn't work. And I basically lost my independence. The only way to prevent future bleeds is to remove these things surgically. So I underwent 3 brain surgeries. And I wrote a memoir about my recovery from the brain injury. At first I wrote it, I had trouble finding, this was back in 2007, I had trouble finding information, anecdotes about living with brain injury. And I felt very lost coming out of hospital because you don't quite fit inside yourself. I mean, you everything feels wrong. Your ways of thinking, you can't. I mean, I lost my ability to think sequentially was damaged, so I had to learn to think around that, and so I learned different thinking styles. So even just from that point of view, also you've gone through a life-changing experience, and I needed to understand what had happened, and I needed to understand to navigate this new world, and I wanted to reclaim my space in the world, my place in the world, and so since I couldn't find anything that satisfied that need, I decided to write something myself and bumble along, following my nose, keeping track of what's going on in the hopes that I'll figure it out. So that was one reason I started writing it. The other reason was I figured, well, if I can't, if I'm having trouble along the journey, other brain injury survivors would too, and I hoped that by writing my own story, it would help others. As time went on, so I was writing a journal type thing. As time went on, I realized that there's a lot of ignorance about brain injury, including among brain injury survivors themselves. The thing is, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that you don't associate with a brain injury. You think you're being inadequate. You're not dealing with things appropriately. For instance, depression. Depression is huge among brain injury survivors. And, you think at first, well, it's situational. It makes sense. I went through this trauma. And why am I not getting over it? This kind of thing. And in my case, it took me, I was having ups and downs emotionally, and I thought it was situational. And then I became suicidal a few times, and that's when I realized, wait, maybe it's more than that. And I ended up going to see a psychiatrist so she could prescribe meds for me. And there are a lot of things like organizational skills go out the window. Everyone expects memory loss. That's easy to figure out. There's a lot of things that, as a brain injury survivor, you don't associate with a brain injury. And I felt like I was being inadequate. I wasn't trying hard enough. There's something called, having trouble with task initiation, which is very similar to procrastination, or the end result is very similar to procrastination, but the mechanism is very different. Procrastination, at some level, you're going to get to it. Task initiation, you're going to get to it, but you can't. It's almost as though there's a block stopping you from, crossing the river and getting to the other side. There's a physical something that's blocking you from doing it. But you know that you're going to do it. So it's not an issue, but you can't do it. And again, as a brain injury survivor, many of us think, we're procrastinating. So again, it's back to handling things inadequately. Sensory overload, having trouble processing sensory input. If I have to deal with large volumes of sensory input, like in crowds, at parties, things like that, bright lights, I freeze. I get traffic jams in my neural pathways, and I often panic, and I'll stand there sometimes having a major meltdown. I thought I was going crazy. I mean, there's this complete and utter chaos in my mind. I don't understand what's going on. I'm bawling my eyes out. I started thinking that there was something very wrong with me. And until I learned that this was a legitimate symptom, I was afraid that I was losing my sanity. So, as I said, I thought that by writing it would help other people both understand what's going on for themselves and for other brain injury survivors that they come in touch with. And because I wanted to reach a broader audience as I continued writing, I felt that I needed to improve my writing skills. Because of my brain injury, I couldn't attend workshops and classes, so I found a writing coach, and she was really fabulous. And she transformed me from an journal writer into an author of a book I'm very proud of. Writing it was hard at times, which is how I learned that I had some PTSD-type issues. For instance, figuring out that I'd actually been suicidal. I mean, you think, I just had some thoughts about it. I would never do it. And then you start writing about it, and you're, digging deeper. And it was a shock to my system to find out that, yes, I did have it in me. Mm-hmm. That was a major one. The various other pieces that I tear up when I think of them. For instance, writing about the time, some of the incidents that happened in inpatient rehab right after the surgeries was really tough. For instance, I couldn't read. Not that I lost the ability to deal with the mechanism of reading. It was that between my very short attention span and poor memory, I couldn't put words together into a sentence, let alone into paragraphs. So I couldn't understand what I was reading. I'll never forget the time when the occupational therapist, she asked me to read a paragraph, and I was very proud that I could read it, that yes, I can read. And then she asked me, what was it about? I had no idea, absolutely no idea. So then she narrowed it down to a sentence. Okay, what's this about? Again, I had absolutely no idea, and I was terrified because I used to be an avid reader, and I was afraid I lost that. I was terrified and devastated. I regained that ability, but because of issues akin to learning disability, to dyslexia type things, I had trouble reading books like I used to read. There was too much information on the page, and the print was too small. And I didn't realize what the problem was. I just knew that at one point I realized that it was the print was too small, and I made the connection that I was doing fine with children's books and some young adult books, but I couldn't handle anything more advanced than that. So when I finally made the connection, I went and bought large print versions, but I couldn't read those either because there was too much information on the page. So when I started writing about it, I started choking up, and I finally learned that I needed an e-reader. And with an e-reader, I'm back to being an avid reader. But just the thought and just remembering that devastation, that was really tough to write about.
It has to be. It really has to be, because I have a friend that went through a traumatic brain injury, and there's a lot that needs to be, considered. PTSD is one of the things that a lot of people who go through traumatic brain injuries that they suffer from, and it's, I think it was so good that you wrote a book on this. What is the title of that book?
But My Brain Had Other Ideas, a memoir of recovery from brain injury.
Well, Deb, where can people contact you and be part of your community and learn more about Threads Around the World and your second book there?
The easiest way would be through my website, which is debbrandon.com. So that's DEBBRANDON.com, and there's a way to contact me through that. I also have a Deb Brandon author page on Facebook, and again, that's another way to contact me. I am really happy to talk to people about anything, including the rough stuff with brain injury, the horrendous issues I occasionally have now with depression. One thing, yes, there were a lot of losses through the brain injury, but there were also a lot of gains. As I said, I have trouble processing large volumes of sensory input because stuff comes at me with similar impact. If you have conversations around you, even if one is closer to you, you can't focus on it because all the conversations around you are coming in at the same level. But at the same time, this has helped me identify details in nature, for instance, that I was unaware of. A dewdrop on a leaf. I remember my son, when he was a toddler discovering the snow for the first time. I remember him poking his finger into a snowbank and then looking at the fingertip and watching the snowflake melt. And I found myself doing the same thing. I'm much better at reading social cues. Having had to take a crash course in asking for help, I had to expose my vulnerabilities, and I learned that by exposing my weaknesses, I was actually turning them into strengths, because when you expose your vulnerabilities, people feel more comfortable opening up to you. So I became much more socially adept. I mean, I used to be very much an introvert, and here I was becoming an extrovert. And I feel very strongly that telling one's story is really crucial back to humanity in general. And so, I open my mouth and out it comes. So, and for brain injury survivors, I know how rough it is, and I'm very happy to share my story and what I know about it. I learned a lot by writing about it, so I'm happy. I hope people will feel comfortable contacting me. I made connections through Facebook, through my website with people, and I've contacted them, via email, through the phone. I mean, I'm really happy to do that. And there've been people that have been in such bad shape, with depression, that I've given them my phone number and said, you can call me any time, even in the middle of the night. This is something that I feel very strongly about, that we need the support, all the support we can get, and I'm happy to do that, as long as they don't do it regularly, waking me up in the middle of the night. But I definitely feel comfortable talking about it. I love giving talks about it, because then again, after the talk, I love giving talks in general, but after the talk, people will come to me and talk to me about their own issues, or a friend who's had brain injury, and it explains various things about what's happening to that person. I had a father of brain injury survivor who just went, that I helped him become a better father to a brain injury survivor, because he now understood for instance, what sensory overload is. I mean, this is a kid who's he had several brain surgeries when he was a baby, so he grew up with issues like sensory overload, and he didn't know how to explain it, because this was part of his life. And his father saw him getting that blank look and getting upset, and he just didn't know what it was. And now that he understands, he knows how to help him, to get him out of the situation, to help him through it, that kind of thing. And they're commonalities. I mean, for instance, people who have autism have issues with sensory overload. I mean, it's not just people with brain injury survivors. And the issue of life-changing experience, depression due to trauma, things like that. So there are a lot of commonalities, and I get a lot of people who will tell me that it really helped them deal with some of these issues, even though they weren't brain injury survivors.
Well, Deb, gosh, we could talk for hours. You're such a wealth of information when it comes to not just when we talk about textiles, but also helping people that have had traumatic brain injuries and kind of offering support and guidance for those folks. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Deb. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your two books, Threads Around the World and But My Brain Had Other Ideas. Again, if you'd like to connect with Deb, you can at her website, debbrandon.com, and we'll have the link below. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.